He told me to smile more, while he handed my job to his mistress. She purred, "Try harder next time." I left quietly. Weeks later they arrived at a board meeting. They arrived to their boardroom and my proposal had already taken over. I kicked off with, "Let's finish what you started. Pack everything by noon." David's text message arrived while I was presenting our biggest campaign of the year to the Morrison Group. My hands shook as I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding the follow-up message. "Sarah will handle the Morrison account going forward. Clean out your office today." 23 years of marriage and he was firing me via text message while I was actively saving a $1 million client relationship. The conference room felt like it was spinning. Robert Morrison, CEO of the largest retail chain in the state, was waiting for my response to his question about our digital strategy timeline. His marketing director, Janet, had her pen poised over her notepad. 3 months of preparation, countless late nights perfecting every detail, and now I couldn't even remember what we'd been discussing. "Excuse me for just one moment," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I need to clarify something with my team." I stepped outside the glass-walled conference room, my phone clutched in my sweaty palm. The hallway seemed longer than usual as I walked toward the restroom, needing privacy to process what I'd just read. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked normal. Same navy blazer I'd chosen carefully this morning, same confident makeup, same determined expression I wore for important presentations. But everything had changed in the span of 2 text messages. I dialed David's number with trembling fingers. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. He was too much of a coward to actually speak to me. "David, I'm in the middle of the Morrison presentation. What is this about? Call me back immediately." But even as I left the message, pieces were clicking into place. The mysterious Sarah he'd mentioned in passing last week. The evening meetings he'd been having without me. The way he'd been reviewing client files I'd never seen him touch before. The strange distance between us that I'd attributed to work stress. I walked back to the conference room where the Morrison Group was checking their phones and looking impatient. These people were expecting the presentation of their lives, the kind of strategic campaign that would set their brand apart from every competitor. They were expecting the woman who'd built Wilson Marketing Group's reputation on innovative thinking and flawless execution. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, sliding back into my seat. "Now, regarding the digital strategy timeline you asked about." For the next hour, I delivered the performance of my career. Every slide, every statistic, every creative concept flowed perfectly. I answered their questions with the expertise I'd built over 15 years. I watched Robert Morrison's eyes light up when I explained our influencer partnership strategy. I saw Janet nodding enthusiastically as I walked through our social media approach. By the time I finished, they were ready to sign on the spot. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," Robert said, shaking my hand firmly. "Innovative, comprehensive, and clearly thought out by someone who understands our industry. When can we get started?" "I'll have contracts prepared by tomorrow," I replied, the words automatic even as my world was collapsing around me. "Excellent. We're excited to work with you personally on this, Chloe. Your reputation in this industry is exactly why we chose your firm." They left the conference room energized and satisfied, probably already planning how to implement the strategies I'd presented. Meanwhile, I sat alone at the table staring at the presentation slides that represented months of my life. Slides that Sarah, whoever she was, would now present as her own work. I gathered my materials slowly, each movement deliberate. The leather portfolio that had been my constant companion for client meetings. The notes I'd handwritten during our initial Morrison Group discovery sessions. The creative concepts I'd sketched during countless brainstorming sessions. All of it would apparently be handed over to someone else by noon. The walk back to my office felt like a death march. Jenny, my assistant for 8 years, was already at my desk with empty boxes. Her eyes were red and she couldn't look directly at me. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Wilson," she whispered. "I was told to start packing. I don't understand what's happening." Neither did I, but I was beginning to get a clearer picture. Jenny had worked for me exclusively since we hired her fresh out of college. She'd learned the business under my guidance, knew my systems, understood my way of working with clients. If David was having her pack my office, this wasn't a temporary situation. "It's okay, Jenny. I know this isn't your choice. My office looked strange with boxes scattered around. The awards on the wall, most of them bearing my name for campaigns I'd developed personally. The client thank you letters that praised my strategic thinking. The photos from company events where I stood next to David, both of us smiling with the confidence of successful business partners. I picked up the framed picture from our 5th anniversary celebration. We'd just landed our first major corporate client, and David had surprised me with a weekend trip to celebrate. We looked so happy, so united in our shared vision. I'd believed we were building something together that would last forever. My phone buzzed with another text from David. Sarah Mitchell will be in at 2 p.m. for transition meetings. Please have client files ready. Sarah Mitchell. The name that was about to replace mine on everything I'd built. I pulled up our employee directory, but there was no Sarah Mitchell listed. A new hire then. Someone David had brought in without consulting me, without even mentioning during our daily operational meetings. I started pulling files from my cabinet, each folder representing relationships I'd cultivated over years. The Henderson Group, where I'd personally saved their product launch after their previous agency failed them. Riverside Shopping Center, whose marketing budget I'd tripled through strategic campaigns that actually worked. The Morrison Group, whose contracts were probably still warm from the printer. Mrs. Wilson? Jenny appeared in my doorway holding a small ceramic mug. I wasn't sure if you wanted this packed or if it should stay. It was the coffee mug Lisa had made me in 3rd grade, painted in uneven purple strokes with "World's Best Mom" written in a child's handwriting. I kept it on my desk for over a decade, a reminder of what really mattered even during the most stressful client emergencies. Pack it, I said quietly. Pack everything. As Jenny carefully wrapped the mug in tissue paper, I realized David wasn't just firing me from the company. He was erasing me from the life we'd built together. Every professional relationship, every client connection, every strategic innovation I'd contributed, all of it was being transferred to someone whose name I'd never heard before this morning. But as I watched my professional life disappear into cardboard boxes, something else was growing inside me. Something that felt cold and calculating and absolutely determined. David might think he could dispose of me like an outdated business plan, but he was about to learn that 15 years of strategic thinking had taught me a few things about warfare. The woman who'd just landed the Morrison Group account in the presentation of her career wasn't going to disappear quietly. She was going to make sure David regretted the day he decided to underestimate her. By noon, my office was empty except for the boxes Jenny had stacked by the door. But my real work was just beginning. The house felt different when I walked through the front door that afternoon. Everything looked the same, the cream-colored walls David and I had painted together 5 years ago, the family photos lining the hallway, the comfortable furniture we'd carefully chosen for our life together. But knowing what I knew now, it all felt like a stage set for a play I'd never auditioned for. I set my boxes down in the living room and listened to the silence. David wouldn't be home for hours. He texted during my drive home to say he was handling the transition with the new team member. The new team member who was apparently taking over my career while I was expected to quietly disappear. Maria's car was in the driveway next door, which meant she was cleaning the Hendersons' house today. Perfect timing. Maria Gonzalez had been our cleaning lady for 10 years, coming every Tuesday and Friday without fail. She'd seen our marriage through its best and worst moments, had quietly cleaned around our arguments and celebrated our successes with genuine warmth. I knocked on the Hendersons' back door, knowing Maria would be finishing up their kitchen around this time. She opened the door with a smile that immediately shifted to concern when she saw my expression. "Mrs. Chloe? What are you doing home so early?" "I need to talk to you, Maria. It's important." She glanced back into the Hendersons' kitchen, then stepped outside and closed the door behind her. At 62, Maria had raised 6 children and managed more household dramas than most therapists. Nothing surprised her anymore. But the way she studied my face told me she sensed something serious was coming. "Is everything okay with Mr. David?" The question was loaded with more meaning than she probably realized. "That's what I need to find out. Have you noticed anything unusual at our house lately? Anything that seemed strange?" Maria's weathered hands twisted the cleaning rag she was holding. "Mrs. Chloe, I don't like to talk about what I see in people's homes. I know, and I've always respected that about you. But I think my husband is lying to me about some things and I need to know the truth." She was quiet for a long moment, weighing her loyalty to both of us against whatever she'd witnessed. Finally, she sighed deeply. There have been phone calls. When you're away on business trips. He thinks I can't hear because I'm vacuuming, but the walls are thin upstairs. What kind of phone calls? Soft talking. The way men talk when they don't want their wives to hear. She looked uncomfortable but continued. And there was a woman who came to the house twice when you were visiting your sister in Portland. Young blonde hair. She didn't stay long, but she knew where everything was in the kitchen. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. When was this? First time was maybe 4 months ago. Second time was last month, the day before you came home from Portland. 4 months ago, David had started his sudden interest in networking events. I wasn't invited to attend. Last month, he'd been unusually affectionate when I returned from visiting my sister, bringing me flowers and suggesting we go out for an expensive dinner. Guilt gifts, I realized now. Did you see anything else? Anything that seemed out of place? Maria hesitated, then reached into her apron pocket. I found this in Mr. David's office trash can about 3 months ago. I was going to throw it away, but something told me to keep it. She handed me a small silver earring, modern and expensive looking. Nothing I would have chosen for myself. It was the kind of jewelry a younger woman might wear to look sophisticated for an older man. I thought maybe it belonged to a client who had a meeting there, Maria continued. But clients don't usually go upstairs to his office. No, they didn't. David always met clients at our business office or at restaurants. His home office was his private space, where he worked on confidential projects and made sensitive calls. The fact that this earring was there meant someone had been very comfortable in our house, comfortable enough to go upstairs, comfortable enough to get close enough to David that jewelry could fall out. Thank you for keeping this, I said, slipping the earring into my pocket. And Maria? This conversation stays between us. Of course, Mrs. Chloe. But be careful. When men start lying about small things, they're usually lying about big things too. Her words followed me back to my house, where I went straight to David's home office. He'd always been careless with passwords, using our anniversary date, October 15, 2015, for everything from his laptop to our shared credit cards. It used to be sweet, this romantic consistency. Now it was going to be his downfall. His laptop was still open on his desk, screensaver running. I moved the mouse and was prompted for a password. 1015. The screen unlocked immediately. His email inbox was a revelation. Messages from someone named Sarah Mitchell going back 8 months. At first, they were professional, discussions about marketing strategies, industry trends, networking opportunities. But by month 3, the tone had shifted dramatically. Can't wait to see you tonight. The Plaza Hotel, room 412, just like we planned. David, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the business restructure. I really think it's time to move forward with removing the obstacles we discussed. The obstacles we discussed. That was me. I was an obstacle to be removed. I scrolled through months of messages, my hands shaking as the full picture emerged. Sarah hadn't just happened into our lives. She'd been strategically positioned there, brought in specifically to push me out. David had been planning this for at least 6 months, maybe longer. The most recent emails were the most damaging. Hotel reservations made on company credit cards. Vacation plans for a trip to Napa Valley scheduled for next month. The same dates I'd been planning to visit my mother. Restaurant reservations at places I'd never been to, charged to our business account as client entertainment. But it was the email thread titled Chloe Transition Timeline that made my blood run cold. They'd been planning every detail of my removal. The Morrison Group presentation had been my test. If I succeeded, they'd take credit for my work. If I failed, they'd use it as justification for replacing me. I printed everything, the laser printer in David's office working overtime as months of evidence spilled out page by page. Love letters, financial records, strategic plans for taking over my clients, even discussions about which employees would be retained under Sarah's leadership. My phone rang while I was organizing the printouts. Jennifer Walsh's name appeared on the screen. Chloe? I heard what happened today. Are you okay? Jennifer had been our accountant for 3 years before quitting suddenly last spring. She'd given 2 weeks' notice and cited creative differences with management as her reason for leaving. At the time, I'd been hurt that she hadn't felt comfortable talking to me about whatever was bothering her. I'm processing it all, I said carefully. But I have some questions about your time with the company if you're willing to talk. Can we meet somewhere? I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. An hour later we sat in a small coffee shop across town, the kind of place where no one from our professional circle would accidentally overhear us. Jennifer looked nervous, stirring her latte without drinking it. "I've been wondering when this day would come," she said finally. "I knew David was planning something, but I hoped I was wrong. Tell me everything." Jennifer took a deep breath. "About 8 months before I quit, David started asking me to handle certain expenses differently. Private charges that he wanted coded as business expenses. When I questioned the ethics of it, he got angry and told me it wasn't my job to judge how he spent company money." "What kind of expenses?" "Hotel rooms, dinners, a monthly payment to something called SLM Consulting that I couldn't find any record of. When I tried to research it, David told me to stop asking questions and just process the payments." "SLM Consulting." Phil Mitchell. Even her fake consulting company used her own initials. Then there were the payroll irregularities. David wanted me to set up a salary for someone who wasn't officially hired yet. When I explained that we needed proper documentation first, he accused me of being difficult and obstructive. Jennifer pulled a manila folder from her purse. "I kept copies of everything. I knew something wasn't right and I thought someday someone might need to see the truth." The folder contained months of financial records showing a pattern of systematic fraud. Company funds used for personal expenses. Fake consulting fees. Payroll manipulation. David hadn't just been cheating on me, he'd been stealing from our business to fund his affair. "Why didn't you come to me with this when it was happening?" Jennifer's expression was sad but knowing. "Because David made it clear that you were part of the problem. He said you'd been making unreasonable demands on the budget and that these expenses were necessary to keep the business running smoothly. He painted you as the obstacle to progress. The same narrative Sarah's emails had mentioned. I'd been systematically undermined for months, portrayed as the problem that needed to be solved. While I'd been working late nights and weekends to grow the business, David had been positioning me as the reason we needed fresh leadership. Jennifer, I'm going to fight this. But I need your help organizing this evidence properly." Her smile was the first genuine one I'd seen all day. "I was hoping you'd say that. David may have fooled you for a while, but he never fooled me. And Mrs. Wilson? He's going to regret the day he decided to cross you." Walking back to my car with Jennifer's evidence folder, I felt something I hadn't experienced since reading David's text message that morning. Hope. Not the naive hope that this was all a misunderstanding, but the strategic hope that comes from knowing you have the weapons you need to fight back. David thought he'd checkmated me with 2 text messages and a mysterious Sarah Mitchell. But he'd forgotten that I'd spent 15 years learning how to research, strategize, and execute complex campaigns against much smarter opponents than him. This was just the beginning. The address on David's credit card statements led me to Riverside Towers, one of the most expensive apartment complexes in the city. I'd driven past this place hundreds of times over the years, always wondering who could afford to live in such luxury. Now I knew we could, apparently, when David decided to fund his girlfriend's lifestyle with our business income. The doorman was a friendly older gentleman who clearly took pride in knowing all the residents personally. When I approached his desk in the marble-floored lobby, his face lit up with recognition. "Mrs. Wilson. How lovely to see you. Are you here to visit Miss Mitchell in 12B? My heart stopped, but I managed to keep my expression neutral. "Yes, actually. I wanted to surprise her." "Oh, she'll love that. She was just saying yesterday how much she appreciates everything you and your husband have done for her. Such a sweet girl and so grateful for the help with her living situation." Help with her living situation. David had apparently positioned himself as some kind of generous benefactor, helping a struggling young professional get on her feet. The doorman continued chatting as he called up to the apartment. "Miss Mitchell? Mrs. Wilson is here to see you." "Oh, she's not answering. He might be out shopping. She mentioned something about picking up groceries earlier." "That's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll just wait in the lobby for a few minutes if that's okay." While I sat in one of the plush leather chairs, pretending to check my phone, I struck up a conversation with the doorman. His name was Frank and he'd worked at Riverside Towers for 12 years. He knew everyone's routines, their visitors, their habits. "Miss Mitchell is such a considerate tenant," Frank continued unprompted. "Always asks about my grandchildren, never causes any trouble. And so responsible about the rent payments, always exactly on time through that automatic system." Automatic system? You know, the corporate account that handles it. Wilson Marketing Group, I think. Very professional setup. Most of our younger residents struggle with the rent here, but Miss Mitchell never has to worry about it. Wilson Marketing Group was paying Sarah's rent directly. Our company was literally funding David's mistress's luxury lifestyle while we'd had to cut employee health insurance contributions 3 months ago due to budget constraints. I thanked Frank and walked back to my car, my mind racing. 8 months of rent at Riverside Towers would be at least $4,000 a month, probably more for a nice unit. That was nearly $40,000 right there, before even considering the restaurants, hotels, and other expenses I'd found in the credit card statements. Back home, I spread Jennifer's financial records across my kitchen table alongside the emails I'd printed from David's computer. The pattern was even worse than I'd initially realized. Every romantic dinner with Sarah had been coded as a client entertainment expense. Their weekend trip to the coast had been listed as a team-building retreat. Even Sarah's gym membership was being paid through a fake consulting contract. "This is systematic fraud," Jennifer said when I called to update her on what I'd discovered. "David hasn't just been unfaithful, he's been embezzling company funds to pay for his affair." "How much total are we talking about?" "Based on what I can document, at least $78,000 over the past year. But that's just what I can prove with bank statements and receipts. The actual amount is probably much higher." $78,000. That was more than most of our employees made in a year. Money that should have gone toward the office renovation we'd been postponing, the marketing software upgrades our team desperately needed, or the performance bonuses we'd eliminated to maintain profitability. Meanwhile, David and Sarah had been living like royalty on stolen funds. I spent the next morning researching Sarah Mitchell more thoroughly. What I found was even worse than I'd expected. The marketing director position on her resume at Henderson & Associates? I called them directly and spoke to their HR department. Sarah had worked there for 6 months as a junior assistant before being terminated for submitting false expense reports. The previous job at Creative Solutions Group, where she claimed to have managed a team of 12. Creative Solutions Group had gone out of business 3 years ago, but I tracked down the former owner through LinkedIn. Sarah had been an intern there for 2 months before the company folded. She'd never managed anyone. Every reference on her resume was either from a company that no longer existed or from people who had no memory of working with her. The prestigious marketing degree from State University? She'd attended for 1 semester before dropping out. David had hired a complete fraud to replace me, and he'd been too infatuated to do even basic reference checks. But the most damaging discovery came from an unlikely source. Tom Rivera, a private investigator I'd worked with on background checks for sensitive client projects, called me back with information I hadn't even requested. "Chloe, I looked into that Sarah Mitchell like you asked, but I found something else you need to know. She's been in touch with Hartley & Associates." Hartley & Associates was our biggest competitor, the agency that had been trying to steal our clients for years. "What kind of contact?" "Lunch meetings. At least 3 in the past month. My source at Hartley says they've been discussing our client list, our pricing strategies, and our internal operations. She's been feeding them information." Sarah wasn't just incompetent and fraudulent, she was actively sabotaging our company by sharing confidential information with our competitors. David had brought in a corporate spy and handed her the keys to our entire operation. That evening, I received a call from Margaret Chin, CEO of Chin Industries and our largest client. Margaret and I had worked together for 8 years, building her company's brand from a small regional business to a major player in sustainable manufacturing. "Chloe, I need to talk to you about something," Margaret said, her voice tense. "I've been trying to reach you at the office, but I keep getting transferred to someone named Sarah who doesn't seem to understand our account." "What's the issue, Margaret?" "She sent me campaign concepts that are completely wrong for our brand. It's like she doesn't understand what we do or who our customers are. The timeline she proposed would conflict with our product launch, and the budget she quoted is 30% higher than what we agreed to." Sarah had been in charge of the Chin Industries account for less than a week, and she was already destroying 8 years of relationship building. "Margaret, I'm not officially with the company right now, but I want you to know that I'm working on resolving this situation. I hope so because frankly, if these are the kind of changes we can expect, Chin Industries will need to consider other options." I specifically chose Wilson Marketing because of your personal involvement and expertise. After I hung up with Margaret, 3 more clients called with similar concerns. Our reputation, built over 15 years of meticulous work, was crumbling in real time. I spent that night creating 2 very different presentations. The first was what everyone would expect, a gracious farewell speech where I'd thank the team for their years of collaboration and wish Sarah success in her new role. It was professional, diplomatic, and completely fake. The second presentation was my real plan. It contained every piece of evidence I'd gathered: the financial fraud, the falsified resume, the corporate espionage, the client losses. But more than that, it outlined a comprehensive strategy for saving the company and rebuilding client trust. I practiced both presentations until I could deliver them flawlessly. The annual Client Appreciation Gala was still 3 weeks away, but I knew it would be my only chance to control the narrative. David had planned to use the event to officially introduce Sarah as the company's new creative leader. Instead, it was going to become the stage for the most important presentation of my career. The presentation that would either restore everything I'd lost or destroy me completely. But as I rehearsed my words in front of the bathroom mirror at midnight, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. David and Sarah had underestimated the woman they'd tried to erase. That was going to be their biggest mistake. The morning after my midnight practice session, I woke up with absolute clarity about what needed to be done. If I was going to destroy David and Sarah at the gala, I first had to make them believe they'd already won. I started with something simple but effective. I brought David coffee in bed, something I hadn't done in months. He looked surprised and slightly suspicious when I appeared in our bedroom doorway with his favorite mug and the newspaper. "What's this about?" he asked, but he was smiling. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been too stressed lately. This break might be exactly what I need." David's relief was visible. "I'm glad you're seeing it that way, Chloe. I know this transition has been difficult, but I really think it's for the best." Over the next week, I perfected the role of the graciously defeated wife. I complimented Sarah's work when David mentioned her ideas. I offered to help coordinate details for the gala, insisting that I wanted the event to be perfect for the company's new direction. I even suggested wine pairings for the dinner menu, drawing on knowledge from years of hosting client events. My performance was so convincing that David started relaxing around me in ways he hadn't in months. He began sharing details about his plans, apparently forgetting that I might have opinions about being completely erased from the business we'd built together. "Sarah has some incredible ideas for expanding our digital services," he said over dinner one evening. "She thinks we could double our revenue within 2 years. "That sounds ambitious," I replied, refilling his wine glass. "Does she have experience with growth strategies of that scale?" "She worked on some major campaigns at her previous jobs. Really impressive results." I nodded thoughtfully, as if I was impressed rather than knowing that Sarah's major campaigns were complete fiction. "She seems very confident. I'm sure she'll do well." The week before the gala, David dropped the bombshell I'd been expecting. "I'm thinking of making an announcement at the event," he said, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. "Something personal." "Oh, what kind of announcement?" He turned to face me, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 23 years ago. Nervous but excited, like when he'd first told me his idea for starting a marketing company. "Sarah and I are getting engaged. I wanted to tell you first before anyone else finds out." I let just the right amount of hurt flash across my face before composing myself. "That's quite a surprise. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of commitment again?" "I've never been more sure of anything, Chloe. Sarah makes me feel young again, like anything is possible." "Then I'm happy for you," I said, and I almost meant it. His engagement announcement would make my revelation even more devastating. "Will you be announcing it at the gala?" "Right after I officially introduce her as the company's permanent creative director." It seemed like the perfect moment. Perfect indeed. David had just handed me the ideal setup for destroying both his professional and personal life simultaneously. That afternoon, I met Patricia Hawkins for lunch at her favorite restaurant downtown. Patricia had been our first major investor, putting her trust and money behind David and me when we were still working out of our garage. At 72, she was still sharp as a blade and had no patience for dishonesty in business. "I've been hearing some concerning things about the company," I said after we'd ordered. I wanted to get your perspective before the gala. Patricia leaned forward. What kind of things? I pulled out a folder containing copies of the most damaging financial records Jennifer had provided. Patricia put on her reading glasses and studied the documents with the same intensity she'd once brought to reviewing our quarterly reports. These expense reports show some irregularities, I said carefully. I'm not sure if David is aware of how they might look to outside observers. Patricia's expression grew darker with each page. By the time she reached the credit card statements showing payments for Sarah's apartment, her face was flushed with anger. This is fraud, Chloe. Plain and simple fraud. I was hoping you might have some insight into how we should handle this. I don't want to damage the company's reputation unnecessarily. The company's reputation is already being damaged. The question is whether we can save it. Patricia closed the folder and looked directly at me. What do you need from me? Your support when I present this information publicly. David has been positioning me as the problem, but I think our clients and investors deserve to know the truth. You have my complete support. Thomas and Richard will feel the same way once they see this evidence. Over the next 3 days I had similar conversations with our other board members. Thomas Burke, who'd invested in us 5 years ago, was ready to call for David's immediate removal. Richard Santos, our newest board member, was concerned about the legal implications of the financial irregularities. We need to act quickly, Thomas said during our private meeting. If word gets out about this fraud before we can control the narrative, it could destroy the company entirely. That's exactly why I think the gala is the perfect venue, I replied. All our clients will be there along with key people in the industry. If we're transparent about what happened and present a clear plan for moving forward, we can actually strengthen client confidence. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding relationships with our employees through small gestures that seemed insignificant but carried deep meaning. I brought morning coffee for the design team, remembering exactly how each person liked it. I stopped by the accounting department to check on Jenny, who'd been struggling with the increased workload since my departure. I miss having you here, Jenny confided during one of these visits. Things have been really chaotic since you left. How so? Sarah doesn't understand our systems. She keeps asking for reports that don't exist and getting frustrated when we can't provide them immediately. Yesterday she wanted a breakdown of client profitability that would have taken me 3 days to compile, and she needed it in 2 hours. Similar stories emerged from other departments. The creative team was redoing campaigns multiple times because Sarah couldn't articulate what she wanted. The client services team was fielding complaints about missed deadlines and poor communication. Is there anything you can do to help? Our lead designer Marcus asked quietly. We're all worried about where this is heading. I'm working on something, I said. Just hang tight a little longer. The excitement in Marcus's eyes told me that our team would be ready to rally behind new leadership when the time came. They'd been waiting for someone to acknowledge what they were experiencing and offer a solution. 3 nights before the gala, I made one final sweep of David's home office while he was out at dinner with Sarah. What I found in a locked desk drawer made my hands shake so violently I almost dropped the papers. Loan applications. Multiple loan applications, all using our house as collateral, all bearing what appeared to be my signature but weren't actually signed by me. David had been forging my name on financial documents, putting our home at risk to fund his lifestyle with Sarah. The amounts were staggering, over $200,000 in secured loans against our house, money that had disappeared into their luxury apartment, expensive restaurants and weekend getaways. If these loans went into default, we'd lose everything we'd worked for over 23 years of marriage. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. David had literally gambled our entire future on his relationship with a woman who was actively sabotaging our business. The night before the gala, I laid out my evidence one final time, organizing it into the most compelling presentation of my career. Financial records, email printouts, client testimonials, loan documents with forged signatures, everything arranged to tell the complete story of David and Sarah's deception. I called Lisa in California, needing to hear my daughter's voice before tomorrow changed everything. Mom, you sound different, she said. More like yourself again. Tomorrow is going to be an important day for the business, sweetheart. I wanted you to know that whatever happens, I've been fighting for everything we built. I'm proud of you, Mom. I always have been. After I hung up, I felt a calmness I hadn't experienced since that morning 3 weeks ago when David's text message had shattered my world. Tomorrow I would either reclaim my life or lose everything trying. But I wouldn't go down without the fight of my life. The truth was finally going to come out, and David's arrogance was about to become his complete destruction. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel sparkled under crystal chandeliers, filled with the kind of elegant crowd that represented 15 years of careful relationship building. I stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived, playing my role as the gracious hostess one final time. My navy blue dress, the one David used to say made me look like I could conquer the world, felt like armor tonight. "Chloe, you look absolutely radiant," said Margaret Chin, kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad you're here tonight. I've been hoping we'd have a chance to talk." "We definitely will," I promised, squeezing her hand meaningfully. Margaret had no idea she was about to witness the most important presentation of my career. David worked the room like the confident businessman he'd always been, his black tuxedo impeccable, his smile bright and practiced. He moved from group to group, shaking hands with clients and competitors alike, completely unaware that several of the people he was charming already knew the truth about his financial crimes. Thomas Burke caught my eye from across the room and gave me an almost imperceptible nod. The board members were in position, seated strategically throughout the ballroom. Patricia Hawkins was at the head table, looking elegant and composed, but I could see the steel in her expression. She was ready for what was coming. At exactly 7:30, David stepped up to the small stage at the front of the room, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. The conversations gradually died down as 200 people turned their focus toward him. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our annual Client Appreciation Gala," David began, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. "Before we enjoy this wonderful dinner, I have some exciting announcements to make about the future of Wilson Marketing Group." This was my cue. I moved closer to the stage, positioning myself where I could see Sarah's entrance. According to my carefully orchestrated plan, she should be arriving any moment. "As many of you know, we've been undergoing some leadership transitions recently," David continued. "Tonight, I'm thrilled to officially introduce you to the woman who will be taking Wilson Marketing Group into its next phase of growth." The ballroom doors opened right on schedule, and Sarah Mitchell made her grand entrance. She wore a stunning red dress that probably cost $5,000, money that had ultimately come from our company's coffers, and her blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo that screamed expensive salon visit. She paused in the doorway, clearly expecting all eyes to turn toward her with admiration. But instead of the impressed murmurs she was anticipating, she found herself walking into a room where several key players were already focused on something else entirely. The presentation screen behind David was already displaying the opening slide of what he thought would be Sarah's introduction. But Patricia Hawkins was distributing folders to the people at her table, and I could see the concerned expressions on their faces as they opened them. "Ladies and gentlemen," David said, gesturing towards Sarah as she made her way through the room, "please welcome Sarah Mitchell, our new creative director." The applause was polite but subdued. Sarah beamed as she joined David on the stage, accepting the microphone he handed to her. "Thank you all so much," Sarah began, her voice slightly breathless with excitement. "I'm absolutely thrilled to be leading this incredible team into the future. Wilson Marketing Group has such a wonderful foundation, and I can't wait to build on everything that's been established here." Everything that's been established. She was already taking credit for 15 years of my work, and she'd been officially in charge for less than a month. "But before Sarah shares her vision for the company's future," David said, taking back the microphone, "I'd like to ask my wife Chloe to say a few words. After all, none of this would be possible without her contributions over the years." This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and David extended his hand to help me up the steps. His smile was warm and genuine. He truly believed I was about to deliver a gracious farewell speech and fade quietly into the background. "Thank you, David," I said, accepting the microphone. I looked out at the crowd of familiar faces, clients I'd worked with for years, competitors who respected our company's reputation, employees who'd trusted me with their careers. "It's wonderful to see so many friends here tonight," I began, my voice steady and warm. "Wilson Marketing Group has been such an important part of my life for the past 15 years. David and I built this company from nothing more than big dreams and a lot of hard work. I saw Sarah relax slightly beside me. This was exactly the kind of sentimental speech she'd expected. We've celebrated so many successes together in this industry, I continued. We've built lasting relationships, created award-winning campaigns, and established a reputation for integrity and excellence. The word integrity carried extra weight, and I noticed Patricia Hawkins lean forward in her chair. But tonight isn't just about celebrating the past, I said, my tone shifting slightly. It's about ensuring that Wilson Marketing Group continues to uphold the values and standards that made it successful in the first place. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to create tension. Sarah was looking at me more carefully now, sensing something in my tone that she couldn't quite identify. However, before I step aside, I think everyone deserves to know the real reason for this transition and what it means for our company's future. The change in the room was immediate. David's smile faltered. Sarah took a small step backward. The audience, which had been politely attentive, suddenly became intensely focused. You see, over the past few weeks, some concerning information has come to my attention, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Information that affects not just the leadership of this company, but its financial integrity and its relationships with all of you. I nodded toward the back of the room, where Jennifer Walsh was operating the presentation equipment. The screen behind me changed from David's generic welcome slide to a bank statement showing payments to Riverside Towers. This is a company credit card statement from last month, I said, turning to gesture at the screen. You'll notice a payment of $4,000 to Riverside Towers Luxury Apartments. This payment, like dozens of others over the past 8 months, was coded as a business expense. Specifically as consulting space rental. The room was completely silent now. David had gone pale while Sarah looked like she might be sick. The consulting space in question, I continued, is a luxury apartment where our new creative director has been living rent-free for the past 8 months, courtesy of company funds. A murmur rippled through the audience. I could see clients exchanging glances, board members nodding grimly and employees looking shocked. Jennifer advanced to the next slide, showing a restaurant receipt. This is from Romano's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. The bill was for 2 people, charged to the company as client entertainment. But the clients being entertained were David Wilson and Sarah Mitchell. On a Tuesday night. While I was at home believing my husband was working late on client proposals. Sarah tried to move toward the microphone, but Thomas Burke had positioned himself near the stage and blocked her path with a subtle gesture. The evidence continues, I said, my voice growing stronger with each revelation. Hotel reservations for romantic getaways, charged as business retreats. Personal shopping trips, coded as marketing research. Even Miss Mitchell's gym membership hidden in our employee benefits package despite her not being officially hired until 3 weeks ago. David finally found his voice. Chloe, this is not the time or place for. Actually, David, this is exactly the time and place, I interrupted, maintaining control of the microphone. Because everyone in this room deserves to know that nearly $80,000 of company money has been stolen to fund your personal relationship. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Margaret Chin was staring at David with disgust. Other clients were pulling out their phones, probably already composing texts to their business partners about what they were witnessing. But the financial fraud is only part of the story, I continued relentlessly. Because the person you've entrusted with our company's creative leadership has built her entire career on lies. The presentation screen now showed Sarah's resume alongside documentation of her real employment history. Sarah Mitchell claims to have been a marketing director at Henderson & Associates. In reality, she was a junior assistant who was fired for falsifying expense reports. She claims to have managed major campaigns at Creative Solutions Group. That company went out of business 3 years ago, and Sarah was an intern there for exactly 2 months. Sarah finally broke. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her composure completely shattered. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "Because unlike you, I believe in thorough research and verification. The board of directors has already reviewed all of this evidence. They've also reviewed the client complaints we've received since you took over my position 3 weeks ago." I looked directly at Sarah as I delivered the final blow. As of this moment, Both you and David Wilson have been removed from your positions at Wilson Marketing Group. The board has voted to restore me as creative director and acting CEO, effective immediately." Sarah's face went from white to bright red. She looked around the room desperately as if searching for someone who might defend her, but found only hostile or disgusted expressions. "Furthermore," I continued, "several of our major clients have already agreed to continue their relationships with Wilson Marketing Group under new leadership. Margaret Chin of Chin Industries, Robert Morrison of the Morrison Group, and Patricia Hawkins of Hawkins Development have all confirmed their continued confidence in our company's ability to serve their needs." Sarah turned and ran. Not walked quickly, not made a dignified exit, she literally ran from the ballroom, pushing past guests and stumbling slightly in her expensive heels. The sound of the ballroom doors slamming behind her echoed through the stunned silence. David stood frozen on the stage beside me, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. 23 years of lies and betrayal had just caught up with him in front of every person who mattered in our professional world. The woman he'd tried to erase had just erased him instead. The silence that followed Sarah's dramatic exit stretched for what felt like an eternity. 200 faces stared at me, processing what they'd just witnessed. Then Margaret Chin started clapping. Slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. Patricia Hawkins joined her, then Thomas Burke, then others throughout the ballroom until the applause became thunderous. David finally moved, stepping down from the stage without a word and walking toward the exit. But unlike Sarah's panicked flight, his departure felt like a man accepting defeat. The guests parted to let him through, their expressions ranging from pity to disgust to satisfaction at seeing justice served. I remained at the podium, overwhelmed by the response. These weren't just polite congratulations. This was the business community expressing genuine support for what I'd done. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my hand to quiet the applause, "I know this evening hasn't unfolded as anyone expected. But I want you to know that Wilson Marketing Group's commitment to excellence and integrity remains unchanged. In fact, it's stronger than ever." The next morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. and didn't stop for 12 hours. Reporters wanted interviews about the Gala Showdown, as the local business journal was calling it. Clients who'd been considering leaving were now asking about expanded services. Competitors were trying to poach our employees, assuming the company would collapse without David. They were wrong. Jennifer Walsh was back at her desk by Wednesday, officially installed as our new CFO with a salary increase and equity stake that reflected her crucial role in uncovering the fraud. Her first act was implementing financial controls that would prevent anyone from ever again using company funds for personal expenses. "We're installing a 3-signature approval system for any expense over $500, she explained during our first executive meeting. "And every credit card transaction will be reviewed weekly by an independent committee." The transformation in our office culture was immediate and dramatic. Employees who'd been walking on eggshells for months were suddenly energized and creative again. Marcus in graphic design submitted 3 brilliant campaign concepts in his first week working under my restored leadership. Jenny, my former assistant, was promoted to office manager and began implementing systems to improve communication between departments. "It's like someone turned the lights back on," Jenny told me during one of our morning check-ins. "People are actually excited to come to work again." But the personal aftermath was more complicated than the professional recovery. David hired Charles Rothman, the most expensive divorce attorney in the city, but his position was nearly impossible to defend. The financial records I'd gathered provided clear evidence of fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. Our first mediation session was tense and awkward. David sat across from me at a polished conference table, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. His lawyer tried to argue that the company expenses had been legitimate business costs, but my evidence was too comprehensive to dispute. "Your client forged my client's signature on loan documents totaling over $200,000, my attorney stated calmly. "He used company funds to pay for his mistress's living expenses. He committed securities fraud by misrepresenting financial information to investors. We're not here to negotiate, we're here to finalize the terms of his surrender." David's eyes met mine across the table. "Chloe, I never meant for things to go this far. You meant every bit of it, David. You just never expected to get caught." The divorce was finalized in 6 weeks. I kept our house, my full ownership stake in the company, and most of our joint assets. David faced potential criminal charges for the forged loan documents, though he eventually negotiated a plea deal that included full restitution and community service. Sarah, meanwhile, had vanished completely. Word through the industry grapevine was that she'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio, working at her family's small-town insurance office. The corporate espionage charges I could have pursued would have meant prison time, but I decided her professional destruction was punishment enough. The therapy sessions were harder than I'd expected. Dr. Rebecca Martinez didn't just help me process the betrayal. She helped me understand how I'd lost pieces of myself over the years of marriage and business partnership. You've been defining yourself through other people's needs for so long that you forgot what you actually wanted, she observed during one particularly difficult session. David's betrayal, awful as it was, gave you permission to remember who you are when you're not trying to keep everyone else happy. Lisa flew in from California the week after the gala, ostensibly to help with the divorce proceedings but really to make sure her mother was surviving the chaos. At 28, my daughter had inherited my strategic mind and David's charm, but she'd never seen me as anything other than the woman who held our family together. "Mom, I had no idea you were capable of something like that," she said over dinner at our kitchen table. "I mean, I knew you were smart and successful, but watching that video of your gala speech, you were like a different person. Stronger. More yourself, if that makes sense." It did make sense. The woman who'd delivered that presentation wasn't the accommodating wife who'd smoothed over David's mistakes for 23 years. She was the person I might have been all along if I hadn't been so focused on keeping the peace. "I'm proud of you," Lisa continued. "And honestly, I think this is the best thing that could have happened to our family. Dad needed consequences for his actions, and you needed to remember how powerful you are." 6 months after the gala, I was featured on the cover of Regional Business magazine under the headline "Phoenix Rising: How Chloe Wilson Turned Betrayal into Triumph." The article detailed not just my personal comeback but the company's remarkable growth under new leadership. Our revenue had increased by 40%. We'd landed 6 new major clients, including 2 Fortune 500 companies that specifically requested to work with me after hearing about the gala incident. Our employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and we'd been named one of the region's best places to work by the Chamber of Commerce. Wilson Marketing Group's transformation under Chloe Wilson's leadership demonstrates that crisis can become opportunity when handled with integrity and strategic thinking, the article concluded. Her story is already inspiring other business leaders to examine their own practices and prioritize ethical leadership. The speaking engagements started soon after. Universities wanted me to address their business students about crisis management. Professional organizations invited me to speak about leadership and resilience. Young women entrepreneurs began reaching out for mentorship, inspired by my refusal to disappear quietly when powerful men tried to erase me. "The most important thing I learned," I told a packed auditorium at the State University, "is that your worth isn't determined by other people's treatment of you." David and Sarah thought they could dispose of me like outdated office equipment. But my value came from my skills, my relationships, and my integrity, things they could never take away no matter how hard they tried. A year after that devastating morning when David's text message had shattered my world, I stood in my renovated office looking at photos from our latest campaign success. The walls displayed new awards, thank you letters from satisfied clients, and a framed copy of the Executive of the Year recognition from the local business journal. Through my window I could see the parking lot where David and I used to park side by side every morning. His space was now occupied by Jennifer's practical sedan, a reminder that loyalty and competence matter more than charm and empty promises. I felt no anger anymore when I thought about David and Sarah. Anger required caring about their opinions, and I'd moved far beyond that. Instead, I felt something more powerful: gratitude. Their betrayal had forced me to discover strength I didn't know I possessed and to build something better than anything we'd ever had together. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that their efforts to hurt you seem insignificant in comparison. David had tried to erase me from my own life, but instead he'd given me the freedom to create a life that was entirely, authentically mine. The company was thriving. My team was happy. My relationship with Lisa had never been stronger. And every morning when I walked into my office, I saw the reflection of a woman who'd survived the ultimate test of character and emerged victorious. That was worth more than any marriage built on lies or any partnership founded on inequality. The woman they'd tried to dispose of had risen from the ashes stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever before. And that was the most perfect revenge of all. Which moment made your heart race the most? Was it Chloe's devastating discovery, her brilliant revenge at the gala, or her triumphant rise from the ashes? Share your favorite part in the comments below. If this story of resilience and justice inspired you, please like and subscribe for more powerful tales of courage.